everyone. We are now live on LinkedIn and Facebook, and thank you for joining us if you're joining us live. And also thank you so much to anybody that's watching this back on our playlist or maybe on LinkedIn or Facebook, and also across the 12 different podcast channels that we share this. Today, Thomas and I are here. Obviously, that's what we do on a Wednesday with our expert clients. And we're going to be talking to Nick Marangos and his guest, Rachel Davis. And I'm going to introduce them in a minute. So today we're going to be talking about recruitment. And we're going to be really open about this sector because we've got Nick Marangos, who is incredibly passionate about it and has been doing it for quite a long time, and even by his own admission is constantly learning and adapting and listening to the market and seeing what's needed. And whether you are a candidate or whether you're a company looking for great talent, or maybe you're another recruitment agency, you never know. I hope you tune in for the next 45 minutes and enjoy just hearing us talk about the sector. So before I really pull my sleeves up and get into this subject, let me just bring a little bit of context to this. So this is called BIP Chat, and BIP stands for Business is Personal. And it is a belief that Thomas and I have had for, well, all our careers. But in 1998, we really cemented that by creating the world's first social network for business. It's called Academy. And we are very devoted to building communities. And the community that we have is called BIP100, which means that we will never have more than 100 experts in our community. And Thomas, my hero, spends his whole time searching for great experts in diverse fields, that his enormous network and my enormous network, that we can bring those experts to you and hopefully help you to find the most important suppliers that are going to help your business grow and thrive. A lot of us spend our time finding clients, but actually I think we all know how critical it is to find great suppliers to our business. So this is why we bring BIP Chat to you. And so please look back at previous podcasts or previous videos on YouTube to see all the amazing experts that we've brought to you, and please contact them. At the end, I'm going to make sure that you've got Nick's full name, and you can look him up on LinkedIn, and also Rachel. But anybody that's watching this now and wanting to do that, Nick Marangos is spelled M-A-R-A-N-G-O-S.
Well done.
You could be Smith. Nick Marangos, M-A-R-A-N-G-O-S.
Not easy to spell that.
And Rachel is Rachel, R-A-C-H-E-L, Davis, I-S at the end. So please look them up and connect with them. And if you've enjoyed this, tell them, and also, spread the word about them, because we've searched far and wide for interesting people that have got strong values. So let's really get into this today. And the subject, as I said, is going to be about recruitment. We're going to look at this from sort of high-level strategy aspect of recruitment, the fact that we're in a candidate-driven market, and what does that mean? Maybe you are a candidate and want to understand how to really represent yourself well, and maybe understand why it is good to either go the contingent route, which we're going to explain what that means for recruitment, or into having a retained relationship with a recruitment agency. And I think let's start off just, Nick, I would love you to introduce Rachel in a minute, but to start with, you're the managing director of Mason & Wake.
Correct. Yeah.
And you've been doing recruitment for 20 years.
Yeah.
So just tell us a little bit about your journey, and then I would love you to introduce Rachel to us all.
Yeah, perfect. Firstly, thank you very much for both of you having me on, and Rachel for joining. I mean, basically, I started back in '99 in Australia. Sales recruitment is what we do. We're a global sales search firm. So we basically cover, sort of mid to senior sales vacancies, and started in Australia and then came over to the UK. Started Mason & Wake about 10 years ago. And the main focus, was, I guess, to cover the salespeople. And yeah, it's been, up and down for the last couple of years. And basically about 12 months ago, decided to focus on retained as opposed to contingent, which we'll talk about. And this is where Rachel came in. I met Rachel 5 years ago, 6 years ago, in another business. We shared the same office, and we kept in touch. And she's my coach mentor on Retain. She's got, I'll let her tell you, because I into detail, but like me, 20 years of recruitment. So we both enjoy the crazy world of recruitment. And I'll let Rachel kind of sum up what she's done.
Thank you. So Rachel, that's brilliant, Nick. And I'm really desperate to get into talking about some of the stuff that I know is really important to you. So Rachel, lovely to meet you as Nick's coach.
Lovely to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Highly of you to us. So really, really nice to meet you at last. And you do career coaching, talent management, headhunting, and you have a particular niche that you support as well. So just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So like Nick said, hello everyone. Sort of over 20 years in search, started in search in a pre-LinkedIn, very traditional search agency down in Bristol, Edward Drummond. And from there, my talent business just grew, and I worked for VCs and PEs and their businesses that they were investing in and their growth teams. And out of all of that, my real passion is about giving people a choice in their career. And so going back to my roots in terms of career transition coaching, I set up Atomic Tangerine, which really is about working with early stage seed businesses and talent that's either transferring or growing within those businesses, but looking for where they naturally excel and making sure that they're actually engaging in the businesses where they're going to add the most value. And I also coach most of the executives that are in those businesses as well. So I wear two hats. Still a headhunter, can't give it up. You're either a people person or not. And I love the process, and it's been an honour to be in that industry that's shifted so much over the last 20 years and grown so much. And yeah, as Nick said, we worked together, I think about 6-7 years ago, and kept in touch, and delighted to be working together again.
Yeah, that is wonderful, wonderful. So now you will realise, anybody here, that I tend to be very dominant on these shows. Poor Thomas, or you see him open and close his mouth waiting to say something. And I have to be very aware of that. So Thomas, I've got an idea of sort of some of the questions, but you want to say anything at this point?
Welcome to the show, guys. It's very nice to have you on the show. It's very nice to talk about the subject of recruitment, because I read the FT every day, the Wall Street Journal, and I know we've now got a surplus of capital and a shortage of labour worldwide. And I don't think we've ever experienced that before. We've also got this thing called the Great Resignation, where people are leaving organisations and building their own lifestyle businesses. And I'm wondering how that's going to affect the labour and recruitment and headhunting market. So I'd love you to cover that, if you could snip that in as you're going through your penny power questions.
Sure. I think that's a great place to start, actually, guys, because this concept of a candidate-driven market and people making some really big life choices, I assume, is creating a little bit of a dearth of talent. And so I'd love us, Nick, what are your thoughts on that when you're working with companies?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. Thanks, Thomas. I think, since the pandemic, I think things have changed massively, where people have moved out and they're being more flexible. So the ability to use Zoom as a business tool, for many years, we tried to get people to do interviews on Zoom, and our clients were very reluctant to use it. No, we want to meet them face to face. Obviously, with COVID, that wasn't possible. So with Zoom, it's helped massively. So it saves time, and we can place people all over the world. And what it's done is has created a massive shortage of great candidates. And also the increase in salaries people are getting when they're leaving is phenomenal. It's absolutely nuts. So
because of the shortage.
Yeah, and also they want to keep the good ones. So typically, I don't want to judge here, but furloughed and then let go. Maybe, the business was struggling, maybe you weren't good enough, but the ones that were kept and want to leave, they're crucial. So businesses don't want to lose them. So yeah, I've had some silly stories of people getting 50K, literally in 48 hours and in the end staying. So I think that's really probably one of the biggest things. And also people wanting to move abroad, but also a lifestyle. I mean, what was a high percentage, 120,000 sort of families left London. I think that's, sort of one of the quotes I got, so people have made that decision. 3 days a week, in the office seems to be the norm today, and 2 days working from home. So yeah, I think there's a lot to adapt, and it's not easy.
And Rachel, this phrase, the Great Resignation, that we hear, it's now become a phrase. I hear it New Zealand, Australia, I hear it in Europe, I see it in the newspaper. What is it? Purely pandemic, or something else happened?
So it's a really valid question, and I think that there's the straight answer about the pandemic, and then there's this undercurrent answer. So I'll deal with the pandemic first. The Great Resignation, it's a buzzword, the reshuffle. I think last year we've had 3 years of quite sharp uncertainty as businesses and as employees. And I think in 2020 to 21, there was a slight pause where people were worried about their jobs. They were feeling quite protective. And then there was a shift where people had been in this unusual situation where their work-life balance, their engagement, if they'd been furloughed and let go of, all of these different things happening, there was a massive shift. And I think people have decided, actually, this is the time. We used to see it in recruitment trends. We used to call it the desert and the peak, where actually end of January, February was where people used to change jobs quite regularly, because, I've been in this job for 10 years, I said I'd leave it, and off they go. But this resignation or reshuffle is more about people really digging into their alignment at work and what suits them and where they want to be working. And I think the challenge there for businesses is they're a little bit behind the curve and having to adjust to that very quickly. So financially, the retention reward there is that's a sort of knee jerk. But the underlying answer to that is, I think this was always going to happen. We were on this path anyway, and the pandemic has accelerated it. People, more and more of my coaches at exec level or returners to work have come and said, I've looked at how I want to live, where my values are, how I want to work. And it doesn't want to be just that 9 to 5 with a basic salary. It's bigger than that. We want to belong to something bigger than that. And I think that's actually just been accelerated.
Well, that's good. And the hybrid working, Nick mentioned 2 days a week at home, 3 days a week in the office. I assume that's Monday and Friday at home and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday in the office, but I guess that's flexible. Has the hybrid working thing, is hybrid working a success? Is it a winner, or is it another one of those buzzwords that's a failure?
No.
I mean, we'll see. Businesses want to create a culture. So it's practically impossible just Zooming all day long. It's weird, like when you're looking to speak to more junior salespeople, which we don't do that often, but what we do, the first question you have to ask is, do you want to be in the office or do you want to work from home? And, anybody under 30 is like, didn't move to London to work in my living room, so that's changed massively. But to answer your question, I think the 3 days, we were talking before pandemic, 4-day weeks, weren't we? And, when you get to a certain level, I think certainly in the world I've recruited in, the more senior people were already doing a day or two at home. Fridays, typically, admin day, they called it. And if the weather was good, they may sneak another day in the for a game of golf or whatever. But I think it's the best way. It's a good balance. It means you're not looking Monday to Friday going, here we go again. I don't think we'll ever go back, especially, Monday to Friday, get on the tube at 7 a.m. to be in the office at 8. I don't think, I hope not anyway, because, that's not sustainable.
So I think this has been a brilliant introduction to this whole subject. I want to sort of get into the detail of things, because you said earlier in your introduction of yourself is that you've, in the last year, have moved your business strategy towards having retainer clients, which I personally love the idea of that. Just emotionally, the fact that you can pull up your sleeves and get really deeply embedded in their needs and really work for them much closer. But do you want to just tell me the journey of that? Because to switch a business model from contingent, which is, I suppose that's just paid on results, isn't it?
Correct. Yeah.
To retainer,
yeah.
It's a big decision. What's it been like moving across?
It wasn't easy, I'll be honest, because 20 years of, I guess, I think recruitment is, you've got to be pretty resilient, right? I think everybody knows that. And when you're doing contingent, it simply means you get a job spec, you agree terms, and if your candidate gets the job, you get paid. And that just wasn't sustainable enough. I think, with 2021, or should I say 2020, a lot of businesses were just, I call it kicking tires. They were literally, we've got a role, let's go. And we've changed our mind. And, it just wasn't working. Up till now, it had been, but I think it wasn't as enjoyable and I suppose as fun. So I met Rachel, we chatted about it. And when I met her 5 years ago, she talked about it, but I dismissed it because I just thought, I'm doing okay doing this. I didn't believe, to be honest, that, retained business for sales recruitment in general was something. I don't know why, called me naive. But from the moment we started engaging in the coaching, and when you win your first retainer, which simply means you pay a deposit, a retainer of a percentage of the fee, it's the same cost, but it just means there's a relationship there, and actually you start working for them. So funnily enough, I suppose your customers are much more willing to return your call, give you feedback, and work with you. And I found another lease of recruitment and passion, because it's really, I guess the enjoyment is when you find the right candidate, they're happy and they give you more work and the word gets out and so on. So it's been really difficult. I found it incredibly hard. It took me a few months to really get my head around it. But once I got it right, thanks to Rachel's help, massively helpful, just in the pitch, the wording, and just walking away, because you get the old clients going, hey, I've got the roles. And it's like, no, I'm not, I'm retained now. I don't do contingent. And that was hard.
That takes a lot of courage.
It does.
I know Rachel said to us earlier before we went live that it's very important that we don't dismiss contingent. So I know we want to also give some power to the elbow of contingent working as well. But is this a secret? But do you think that anybody that's on retainer as a company is going to really get more likely to find the best clients, best candidates? Because if I had someone on retainer, personally, I would make sure I served them first with the best people.
I'll let Rachel answer that. She's probably got
So I think, as I said, there's a place for all different models of recruitment, and it is client driven. And like Nick, if you run a search agency or firm, you've chosen to do that because you firmly believe that the relationship needs to be aligned in terms of a retainer. The candidate caliber scale, I call it, that's available is arguably down to contingently, if you've got a great network and you've by luck come across somebody who's actively looking, by all means, it's not going to dilute the caliber of that candidate, but there is an element of luck there as well. With the search side, the methodology really leaves no stone unturned, and you look at all, and I think you get far more breadth of caliber. But you're also talking to those passive candidates, which actually post-pandemic are far more approachable now because people are less worried about a move. So you can have those open conversations and those returned calls, but that takes time and investment. Whereas with the contingent, it is what I call a little bit more fast and furious, but they are using amazing tools to help with that, and the due diligence is there. But the search methodology has, I think, a more emotional, intelligent connection with the business. And if you are an individual who really understands the culture of the business you're hiring for, nothing can take away that intuition of interviewing a candidate and knowing the fit, and knowing that there's going to be a chemistry between the senior leadership team.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that's so important. We don't want, I'm all for all the technology and what the assessment tools we use now in search and in contingent, and the behavioural profiling are fantastic. They're great scaffolding to make sure that we're making the right decisions on hiring the right fit. But I'm a great one for the intuitive choice as well. And I think you can't take that away from your client, but you can guide it. And I think search allows that.
So I was going to ask you about, another aspect of recruitment is the DIY recruiter, the person who says, I don't need anybody to help me. I don't know whether that's a phrase, the DIY recruiter, but the person who says, I've got all this access to all these people on LinkedIn, I'll find them myself. Personally, if you can outsource a skill to somebody else to do it well, I think that must be better. But are we seeing that starting to reduce now? People starting to get LinkedIn fatigue in doing recruitment, Nick?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, businesses want to save. They still want to save money, I think. And people think recruitment is quite straightforward. Just go on LinkedIn, few messages, they'll come back to me. Bob's your uncle. I don't, what we found is a lot of businesses do it for themselves 2 or 3 months, and then they go, oh my God, can you just take over, please? And we don't charge anymore. We just say, fine, and we just, who have you spoken to? What have you done? So that's where I think the market is at the moment. And it's great because they know how hard it is. So there's a mutual respect. And to then, I guess, pitch the retainer, if you like, it's a lot easier because then I don't care. Just go and find me the people, and we need them in place as soon as possible. So yeah, I definitely think because there's a lot of, like, the market we're in is private equity, VC backed, venture capitalist backed. So there's a lot of money there. So they want to grow fast. So it's very difficult when you've got 1 or 2 people to hire. Possibly you can do it yourself. But if you need to hire a team across the globe and different levels and so on, it's very, very difficult.
And it's the unpredictability of people, because I did recruitment years ago just on my own, because Thomas in the mid-90s was bringing companies from America over and helping establish them in the e-commerce and e-procurement world. And he said to me, Pen, you're at home with the kids, you know this world, do a bit of recruitment. When you're dealing with people and their lives, you can really think, well, they're definitely going to take this job, and there's 6 months of work that I've done, and then, like you said, they'll go back to their existing company and they'll suddenly get a 50 grand improvement in salary, like you mentioned at the beginning, and all that work. And I imagine if you're trying to run your job and you've got that risk factors on top, I mean, if recruitment run smoothly, everybody could do it, couldn't they? But it's correct. It doesn't run smoothly, does it?
I mean, if I can jump in here, I think the unpredictability of people is something which is a bit of a challenge actually right now in the market, right? Because there's less friction about changing jobs, and people are open to conversations and approaches. We've moved away from like I said earlier, recruitment being a sort of necessary evil for businesses to have to do. It's always sort of been like, oh gosh, we've got to pay recruitment fees, even though they love to have the best talent. I think we're moving away from that because more and more people are going out and happy to, they understand the importance of it because of the lack of jobs and the competitiveness and the retention. But one of the main things that differentiates, I think, Nick's search model is that it looks at the onboarding of a candidate, and that is where the due diligence needs to be, to ensure that you've got a managed expectation of that candidate actually joining that business. And at the moment, many candidates across the board could be running in 3 or 4 final stages. And if you don't have that due diligence and share the risk with your client in terms of that search process and the investment in it, and it's just a transactional piece of work, then there's a lack of a relationship and loyalty there from the candidate. And from the business, it's about ensuring the first point of contact with that candidate is about the candidate experience, right the way through to, you know, their years in the business. And it's been a neglected major part of recruitment and businesses, and it's just coming to the forefront now. And I'm a real advocate for that onboarding, and search has always done it. So I think this is the search time for onboarding, bringing it into the market.
And Rachel, when you talk about the candidate doing different streams at the same time, are you saying that the candidates might be going through the onboarding process with more than one company at once, deciding which one they finally choose? So that
I mean, most companies don't have formulated onboarding processes. It's ad hoc. It's either a senior exec or a manager going, yes, I'll onboard. And the talent acquisition teams now are really coming into their own about being needed, because businesses are recognizing that first conversation is the start of onboarding. But quite often, candidates are exploring not just the salary and the location, they're exploring the wider considerations and alignment of that role. And that's what's exposed on the onboarding. It's a bit like when you meet somebody for the 3rd time, you really get to know them, because the first time it's always lovely, the second time it's slightly more comfortable, and the 3rd time the guard is down a little bit more. And that's the same with the candidate experience. But I definitely think that candidates are quite open to looking at their options.
So if you've got sorry, Thomas, you want to carry that?
I was going to say, Nick, when you talk about companies want to build a culture, and Rachel talked about the chemistry and the intuition that you still want to have that final matching process outside of all these psychometric testing systems. Are you, because you've been doing it for 20 years, 30 years, do you kind of know who fits where?
I mean, there's a pattern, I think. People come from certain companies that sell in a certain way. I think also I have my 3 or 4 questions I ask as soon as I meet somebody via LinkedIn or whether they've been referred. And those answers very quickly can determine whether they're the right type of person for that company, you know, the motivation for looking for a new job, the salary expectation, how have they performed. There is a pattern, definitely. And you know they'll fit in certain businesses, you know, better than others, just because the way the line managers would manage them, but also how the business structured and, you know, what they're looking for. Absolutely.
So if you were placing Rachel, Thomas and Penny, these 3 new candidates you've got on this show today,
right,
would they all be going to the same company, or would they be going to 3 different companies?
I think all different. You're all very different people. I want to, you know, obviously place all 3. No, I think it depends what you're looking for, but no, I think you'd all be very different. And I think that's why I love I love recruitment, because every conversation is different. You know, people are looking to move for different reasons and their success and so on, but also what they're selling. You know, the technology today, there's so much out there and it's fascinating. I mean, we do a lot in financial crime, anti-money laundering, and know your customer, KYC, you know, and there's an abundance of companies out there doing that, but they all have their own little, you know, I guess sort of product specialization. So yeah, I think it's down to those kind of first 5 minutes with the candidate will really give you an idea. And then typically the second call, I would do the same. I would double check that the motivations, the salary, everything that they're looking for hasn't changed, because you'd be amazed how much people do change their view once they've started looking and speak to other agencies, or they speak to their other halves. And that's a massive factor, obviously being personal. Look, I've changed my mind. I've spoken to my partner, wife, whatever, or husband, and, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for this. So there's a lot of cross-checking you need to do to make sure. And I think the 20 odd years of doing this has given me a fairly good idea, if it's feasible or not. And I will tell the candidates, not the right time to move, in my opinion. You haven't been there long enough, or it doesn't add up for me. I can't help you. And I think that's part of probably why I've been able to do this job for so long, is there is a lot of honesty, even though I think they're a great person and I could get them into, it's not thinking just about the fee, it's about the long-term relationship with the candidate and the client, and I think that's, that comes with.
So with the candidates, Nick, because I'm hoping we've got a lot of candidates listening here, and they're in sales, senior sales, that's the industry they want to be in. They would contact you, and say, I'm wanting to make a move. And then would you go and look for a company that they could go to?
So there's two ways. So if they see an advert, because we do advertise on LinkedIn and a couple of the job boards, Read and Total Jobs, because people do still apply. We would, if they're not suitable for any of the open vacancies or retainers we're working on at the moment, there is that flip side where I'm quite old school. I don't know if Rachel still does it as well. Can't remember the terminology you have for it, but it's basically we would go and source a list of companies, we'd work together, and then we would go and openly go and speak to the chief revenue officer, CEO, MD of those businesses, and say, I've had permission from the candidate. That's really important. So we've come up with a list we've agreed on, and we would approach the senior members of that business and say, we've got somebody from a competitor, or we think who would be a good fit. And we're very transparent. We share the CV, what salary they're looking for, location, etc. In the old days, that was quite successful. It does happen. You do get it. It's about timing. But if you look at what's going on LinkedIn and you are very apparent and people know who you are in the industry, they normally will reply going, look, not right now. However, we might be looking for so-and-so. So it's a twofold thing, because it's a business development sort of approach, but also it does help that candidate. But you have to share with the candidate who you're going to approach. We never ever send somebody's CV. In my 20 odd years of doing this, I've never sent somebody's CV without their permission.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Absolutely.
And then, Rachel, you mentioned talent gaps, and you said how it's a very competitive market, and we've called it a candidate-driven market.
Yeah.
Are companies starting to realise that they've got to be a little bit less arrogant about the fact, I've got a job for you, you lucky thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and this is taking, going back to saying that there's the shift in businesses through the pandemic having to orbit around their HR and talent acquisition departments and people. And, one of the things there is headhunters, recruiters, HR people have taken so much more on during this pandemic that isn't part of their jobs, because it's brought up so many different needs, and the advertising for roles or the talent gaps. I've got a favourite phrase, probably known for pipelining those talent gaps, is no longer just like talked about. It's very, very real, because throughout the pandemic, that these gaps have widened and businesses have lost people, and without those gaps filled, they're in a lot of trouble. And I think they're far more open to their talent teams or recruitment services coming to them and saying, right, this is the way that we're moving forward with it. Whereas previously, I think they probably would have been a little bit more stringent in terms of their preferred supplier list, or just advertising themselves, or just believing that actually their own job board and advertising on LinkedIn was enough. And I think candidates are a place where they're the most empowered they've ever been in terms of self-selection. And that cannot be ignored by businesses. It's no longer line up and I'll choose my favourite fit. It's actually, does this candidate want to join us? So it's an interesting shift. And I think for the better, because it means that there is, recruitment or talent acquisition is now becoming holistic for the person. It's not as scrappy as it used to be.
Yeah.
No, it's nice. I'm all in favour of companies having some power, but it is nice to think that now the candidates and their careers, and also as you implied, Rachel, earlier, about it's not just about the money and the location.
No,
they're having to think about, I guess, the well-being aspects of the organisation, the culture.
Well, I mean, when I've coached people through the pandemic who are in transition, one of the key things and considerations there, and I've got a great phrase, is, you don't change roles purely for one aspect of the pillar of why you do in your career, because realistically, if you only change for salary, quite often 3 to 6 months later you're going to be just as unhappy. You've just changed your commute, but you're doing it the same role. And get underneath the skin of why do you want to change. And actually some of the onus is on the candidate to educate the business about how best to engage them. And candidates, and as employees and people within our career, we can be quite lazy about expecting people to understand how to get the best out of us. But all the great people in businesses that add the most value know how to steer that and educate their employees on it. So there's lots of learnings from both sides.
Yeah. And Nick, you went into the sales. That's your specialisation.
Yeah.
Is salespeople. Chief Revenue Officer, you said. I've never heard that phrase.
Have you not? Oh, really? Okay.
There's a posh word for a sales director.
I'm not sure that. Yeah. Okay. Let's agree.
Shall I call you that now, Thomas? You're the Chief Revenue Director.
No, I like sales. I love sales.
And I was just curious to know, in terms of a sector for you to be serving, is that one of the most volatile, the sales sector?
I mean, I guess I love talking to salespeople. I have tried different markets. It wasn't for me. And also I get on with salespeople, the stories, and they return your call, and you can have a bit more banter maybe.
Yeah.
And you have 20 years of networking in that area.
Yeah. And I started in that, and I guess I stuck at it.
But that niche skill that you have, I mean, I'm hoping people are hearing this, that somebody who specializes on a particular job specification and who knows it and has the connections and has that sixth sense for whether or not this person is who they say they are.
Yeah.
An incredible advantage when you're at work with you.
Yeah, I hope, yes, I think so, definitely. I think that the difference, and we talked about, obviously it's a candidate-driven market, using LinkedIn Recruiter, which is a fantastic tool, but probably overused now. People won't respond if you have maybe 1 or 2 years, a junior sort of, I guess, consultant with a recruitment agency, because of, I guess, how long I've been doing this and my title possibly, and I get a better response. I've tried it. So it's definitely got its advantages, but I suppose within 5 minutes, I would have a pretty decent conversation, literally 5 minutes, to say, look, it's not for you, but let's keep in touch, as opposed to, rambling on about a role that person's not really interested in, and trying to get the numbers on the board to make me look good and my manager's happy that I'm doing a good day's work. That's a massive difference and advantage. So yeah, but also I do enjoy it. I do actually, crazily enough. A lot of my friends who've done this as long as me kind of laugh, going, you're just one of those. But I do love helping people and talking to them. And when we do find the right role and the right salary and they're happy, it's very satisfying.
And in terms of sectors that you serve mostly, which sector?
Yeah, so it's technology sales. So software as a service, SaaS is huge. We do a lot around business intelligence and content, which again is a platform around content and information. So that can be for the legal, financial, insurance, capital markets, investment banks, and so on. And I guess the software as a service goes across all industries, from HR, payroll, benefits, you name it. Because that's a booming industry where businesses have really had a lot of investment. I mean, if you look at, I don't know if you've heard of something called PitchBook, that basically gives you a detailed summary of who's investing in who, what private equity or venture capitalist is investing, how much, when, what industry, when it came out, all that kind of stuff. That's really, really interesting to get that information, because then typically if they've had sort of 50, 100 million invested, they're going to need to start hiring in the next 6 to 18 months, typically, because they want to see a return on their investment. So there's a need there. And if you can, you can get through to those guys and they really understand, your weight in gold and how you can help and reach the people they really need for their business, it's very satisfying, very satisfying.
Very good, very good. Well, we're nearly at the end of the show. I suppose that, I just want to ask this last question. So if you're a candidate, so if you're somebody sitting in a job and you're not really enjoying it, is now a good time to be moving around, do you think? I think we might have said yes to that through this whole show.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think the market's so fluid at the minute. It's about making sure you know what you're looking for in that next move, because the choice is there. But also perhaps educating the people who you work with as to why you want to move first.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But in my experience of nearly 40 years in tech businesses, all those people, and I was sales marketing director of a company for 8 years, all those people that came and then we tried to retain them by giving them another salary, they still left in 3 or 4 months for whatever reason.
I mean, we know that if you mentally think you're going to leave.
Absolutely. It's the hygiene factors.
The seed is there.
Yeah, absolutely. So so if you are a candidate, if you are someone who's feeling that way, I imagine it's much better to go to a search agency. It's going to look after your career than to try and find a job on your own.
Yeah, I mean, I would say do both, just so that you get the experience. I can't help every single person that gets in touch, let's be honest. But I think, as Rachel said, I'd love to, but that's impossible. Yeah. I think it's, as Rachel said, why are you looking? Be clear about what you want. It's fine to have an exploratory chat. I'm more than happy to do that. But I will say, as I said before, if it's not right or I can't help you, I'll be honest. But I think for you, the motivation's got to be the right reasons. If it's just purely money, that's not a good reason. If you're not happy, the product doesn't work, the market's tough to sell in, they changed your commission 15 times, you've had 3 different bosses in 12 months, the list goes on. Those are valid reasons to just go, hang on a minute. Or they're running out of money, you're going through a Series C and it's not looking like it's going to happen. Why don't you go before you're pushed and your salary hasn't been paid for a couple of months, whatever it might be. But I would say if you see an advert and you like the look of it, get in touch. It's not always about making the placement there and there. It's a future thing, and we're here for a long time. We're not going anywhere. So if we can't help you now, we can definitely try and help you in the future.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, we're just about at the end of the show now. Did you want to say something, Thomas, before we?
No, I just thought that was a very informative show. Yes. I've got the transcript. You're both superb communicators and operators.
Fantastic.
Oh, thank you.
You're great interviewers, both of you.
Yeah. I really genuinely say this for anybody listening. We've known Nick a very long time now as a client, but really closely, and we know his values and we know his purpose and passion and commitment to this. So I would say, if you are a company who is looking for people, try and get in touch and consider the fact that a retainer is going to save you so much time and pain and frustration and stress It's honestly not as expensive as people think. I think if you did a cost analysis of doing that against doing contingency, you would probably find that you've come up tops going the retainer route. So thank you, and thank you so much, Nick. And then Rachel, I understand that people can come to you around career advice, and also it sounds like you go into organisations to help them around their talent acquisition and the culture and everything. So again, please get in touch with Rachel. So that's Nick Marangos. If you're listening to this rather than seeing it, you can see his name if you're watching this, but is Marangos. So look him up on LinkedIn. And Rachel is Rachel Davis, IS at the end. And thank you so much for a great show, guys. Really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much. Take care.
And
Bye.